Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are watching this video. Today we have a nice video for you today about the meaning of words, and it is the C word. That would be communism. Now, this is not a comprehensive view at all, obviously. This is going to simply be an overview. Now, that being said, first off, as with all of these videos, we're going to look into what your initial Google search is going to say, and then of course the Encyclopedia Britannica, Wikipedia, since Wikipedia is a source that most people are going to almost immediately go to beyond simple Google search. I also have a couple of other things as far as pre-Marxist communism, which yes, historically was a thing, because communist ideas obviously were not a thing before Karl Marx, but we'll get into that later. So if you simply put in communism definition into a Google search, I have DuckDuckGo. This is what comes up. Theoretical economic system characterized by the collective ownership of property and by the organization of labor for the common advantage of all members. Definition 1. Definition 2 is a system of government in which the state plans and controls the economy, and a single, often authoritarian party holds power, claiming to make progress toward a higher social order in which all goods are equally shared by the people. Now, number 3 is generally what people think of when talking about communism, as far as when it was put into practice in Soviet Russia. The Marxist-Leninist doctrine advocating revolution to overthrow the capitalist system and establish a dictatorship of the proletariat that will eventually evolve into a perfectly egalitarian and communal society. Now, this definition, number 3, is what Karl Marx was writing about in the Communist Manifesto. That is, of course, the Marxist part of Marxist-Leninist. Of course, Lenin is the one who really tried to put that into play in Soviet Russia. Now we'll go to the Encyclopedia Britannica. We have here communism. It's listed under ideology. It is a political and economic doctrine that aims to replace private property and profit-based economy with public ownership and communal control of at least the major means of production, e.g. mines, mills, and factories, and the natural resources of a society. Communism is thus a form of socialism. This is something that people who advocate for socialism and shun communism because of the negative connotations tend to try and get away from. However, it is absolutely correct. Communism is a form of socialism, and is a higher and more advanced form according to its advocates. And we'll get into also that part later. Exactly how communism differs from socialism has long been a matter of debate, but the distinction rests largely on the communist adherence to the revolutionary socialism of Karl Marx. Of course, there's much more history here. However, that's not the point of this video. The Wikipedia article states that it is a political and economic ideology whose goal is the creation of a communist society, socioeconomic order centered on common ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange that allocates products on a society based on need. Communist society entails the absence of private property and social classes, and ultimately money and the state. Communism is part of the broader socialist movement. Again, funny enough, it's right here on Wikipedia. However, people who claim socialism don't claim communism because of the negative connotation that communism has attached to it. Socialism is seen as a utopian concept, whereas communism has been seen to be negative, resulting in the deaths of millions of people. Let's go over here. This is also Wikipedia, because people will say, oh, well, Marx didn't actually come up with it. He simply wrote about it in the Communist Manifesto. I've heard that argument before. And while it is true, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels did define communism as a political movement in 1848. And there were similar ideas in the past which could be called communist experiments. I can agree with that from a historical standpoint. Marx himself saw the original hunter-gatherer state of humankind as a primitive communism. He theorized that only after humanity was capable of producing surplus did private property develop. I would say that that's incorrect. Hunter-gatherers, we can tell from burial sites, especially from anthropological studies, especially when you study when civilizations actually started to occur, when people started being buried with personal things, such as a personal spear, a doll or an idol, things like that, generally religious artifacts or weapons. Those things would be personal to them, so I'm not sure where he gets the idea that only when a surplus arises did private property develop. I would also argue that the hunter-gatherer is not communism, that would be communalism. Because communalism, again, this is just a Google search, if you look at number 2 here, strong devotion to the interests of one's own minority or ethnic group rather than those of society as a whole. So the hunter-gatherer societies would have been primitive groups, small groups of people of a generally single kind of person. That would be tribes of Africans or tribes of, say, the primitive Norse, primitive, the pre-Irish, etc. We also have here, for the argument against communism not being part of socialism, we have Karl Marx viewing communism as the ultimate goal of socialism. See, he explained that the society would emerge after the revolutionary transformation of capitalism, where class distinctions would be abolished and resources would be shared according to need. He believed socialism was a transitional phase leading to this final stage of the classless society. That's something else that I would also like to share, because you see this right here, firebrand.red. I had to look this up to make sure what it was. It actually is a communist organization. It is committed to revolutionary socialism, internationalism, liberation from all oppression, and the political independence of the working class. We stand in the tradition of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Trotsky, and Luxemburg. We intervene in social movements and labor struggles to the best of our ability in order to advance those fights and win our fellow fighters to revolutionary conclusions. So, going on this, right here, the specter haunting communism, the specter of socialism. Reformists and Stalinists, social democrats and communists alike, have invented socialism as a replacement for Karl Marx's revolutionary communism. Interesting. So all these communists have invented socialism to replace Karl Marx's revolutionary communism. They try to divert the left-wing movement from its goal of total abolition of capitalism. Instead, they want a surface modification of capitalism, in the words of Rosa Luxemburg. Thus, the new reformist goal blunts the drive for revolutionary transformation. So these people who claim to be the true adherents to communism actually claim that socialism is a blunted form, surface modification of communism. And this diversion was originally accomplished in part by inventing a new distinct stage, a new mode of production between capitalism and communism. This mode of production was defined as socialism, the planning and nationalization of the economy, without all the other features of Marxist communism. The transitional phase became the final goal for Stalinists and Social Democrats, and even for some who identify as Trotskyists. So it's very interesting that an entire group that claims to be adherents to Marx, Engels, Lenin, Trotsky, and Luxemburg, in their tradition, claims that socialism is simply a blunted form of communism. And they claim that Karl Marx also said that socialism is only a phase in communism, and communism is truly the end goal. I find that to be very interesting. However, what we have been told throughout this current 21st century is that communism is this egalitarian and communal society where everybody is equal. It abolishes the bourgeoisie. That way the proletariat, that would be the common people, is the only kind of people, and everybody is equal. Well, I hate to break it to you, but somebody has to rule, and capitalism is still the best system. It might have its flaws, might have its downsides, and those can be worked within the system. However, communism has been tried again and again. Maoist China, the Soviet Union, multiple places. It doesn't work. People always die in the millions. This is the truth. Hey, if you've listened this far, thank you so much. If there's anything you want to add, please go ahead and get a comment down below. Thank you.